My name is Victoria. I am 36 years old, and I never imagined that the most painful betrayal of my life would be delivered in front of 50 people at my daughter's graduation celebration. He lifted his glass. His voice was steady at first, then sharp like a blade. I've decided to start a new life without you. Those words did not come in a quiet conversation at home. They came in an upscale restaurant with polished silverware and chandeliers above us, while Amelia, our only daughter, still wore her graduation cap. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Forks clattered against porcelain, conversations froze mid-sentence, and all eyes turned to me. Everyone expected the script they had seen in movies. The betrayed wife would cry, maybe scream, maybe throw the champagne in his face. But I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, a small smile pressing against lips that wanted to tremble. For 28 years, I had been Gregory's partner. I put my dreams on hold so he could chase his. I built stability so he could gamble it away. I endured his restless phases, his finding himself moments. I became the anchor while he drifted from one failed venture to another. Yet, in that moment, I understood something. If I broke down in front of this audience, I would give him the victory he wanted. He wanted a spectacle, a memory that painted me as the hysterical woman who couldn't accept change. Instead, I looked directly at him and whispered, "Congratulations on your honesty." The hush in the room deepened. My daughter's face froze in horror. Her smile turned to stone. From the corner of my eye, I saw Cassandra, his younger lover, shift uncomfortably at the back table. She was the same woman who once came to my Christmas parties, drank my wine, and even asked me for career advice. And the friends who sat with her, people I had trusted for years, knew all along. Their silence screamed louder than Gregory's announcement. But this was not my downfall. This was my stage. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. My movements were calm, practiced, almost ceremonial. I placed it beside his plate, my fingers brushing the glass he had lifted in triumph. He looked at me confused. "What's this?" His grin faltered. "Something for you to read later," I replied, my tone like steel wrapped in silk. I kissed Amelia's cheek. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. Today is still your day." My voice carried over the room, firm and unwavering. Then I stood, smoothed my dress, and addressed the guests. "Please enjoy your meal. I wish you all a lovely afternoon." The heavy door of the restaurant closed behind me, cutting off the murmurs and whispers that erupted once I left. Outside, the humid summer air of Augusta wrapped around me. For the first time in years, I inhaled deeply, without the weight of compromise pressing on my chest. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step an act of defiance. I was not running away. I was stepping into something new. Behind me, I heard the door slam open. Gregory's voice followed, no longer commanding, but frantic. "Victoria, what the hell is this? What have you done?" His words cracked like glass, desperate and shrill. I didn't look back. My lips curled into the faintest smile. He thought this was the end of my story. He didn't realize it was the beginning of his unraveling, because the envelope he clutched contained more than paper. It contained months of careful preparation. Every late night when he thought I was sleeping. Every morning when he believed I was distracted. I was gathering. I was documenting. I was building my quiet arsenal. And tonight, in front of everyone, I had handed him the key to his downfall. The woman I had been the patient wife, the silent supporter, the background character, was gone. And in her place stood someone new. Someone unafraid of the whispers, the judgment, the fallout. Someone ready to claim back every piece of her life. That day, Gregory believed he had humiliated me. He had no idea that I had already moved 3 steps ahead. I could feel the weight of 50 stares pressing against the restaurant's glass windows as I walked down the sidewalk. Inside, they were probably whispering, inventing stories, already choosing sides. Some would pity me. Some would admire my composure. Others would call me cold. But only one person in that room truly understood the depth of what had just happened Gregory, and he was holding the envelope that would shatter the life he thought he controlled. My name is Victoria. I am 36 years old, and I have spent almost 3 decades playing the role of the perfect wife. I set aside the dream of opening my own consultancy to raise Amelia. I worked overtime to cover Gregory's impulsive investments. I smiled through his failures, patched up his ego, and convinced our daughter that her father was a man worth admiring. But behind every sacrifice, a quiet resentment grew. Not because I gave, but because he only took. That afternoon, when he stood and declared his freedom, I realized something powerful. He had not freed himself from me, he had freed me from him. The irony was almost sweet. He thought humiliation would silence me. Instead, it gave me a stage. He thought betrayal would weaken me. Instead, it clarified my strength. That is the strange thing about betrayal. When the person you trust most cuts you open, the wound stings, but the truth breathes. I remember the way Amelia looked at me in that moment, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. She thought her family was collapsing. What she didn't know was that I had already built a foundation stronger than Gregory's lies. She would learn soon enough. As I walked away from that restaurant, I carried nothing in my hands, but everything in my heart. Years of anger I had buried under politeness. Years of endurance that had molded me into steel. Years of silence that had given me the patience to strike when it mattered most. I want to pause here because if you are listening to my story, you might be wondering what you would have done. If someone you loved stood in front of family and friends, stripped you of dignity, and expected you to collapse, what would your reaction be? Would you scream, cry, run, or would you smile and hand them the weapon that will undo them? Tell me in the comments how you imagine yourself reacting, and if you believe in the power of taking back your story. Subscribe to stay with me through this journey because I promise it only gets more intense from here. Gregory's footsteps had followed me outside. He called my name again, more desperate this time. His voice cracked as if the confidence he wore like armor had splintered. I didn't stop. I didn't answer. For once, his panic was his alone to carry, and in that silence, I tasted freedom. When I reached my car, I let myself lean against the door for a moment. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from release. 28 years of compromise, excuses, and quiet despair had been building toward this very moment. Betrayal hurts, but betrayal also reveals. And it had revealed to me that my greatest strength was not in holding our marriage together. It was in letting it collapse, so I could rise from its ruins. The envelope Gregory clutched contained the first spark: divorce filings, documentation of his financial deceptions, proof of his affair, and most importantly, the clause in the prenuptial agreement he had insisted upon fidelity. He believed it expired years ago. He never bothered to read carefully, but I did. And that oversight would cost him everything. The truth is, I had been preparing for this day for months. Each bank transfer I traced, each message I captured, each receipt I tucked away. I was not blindsided, I was armed. And as much as Gregory thought this was his victory, he was walking directly into a battlefield I had already mapped out. That is why I smiled in the restaurant. That is why I walked away with dignity. Not because I was unhurt, but because pain had taught me patience, and patience had given me power. When I started my car, I glanced back once at the restaurant doors. Gregory was still standing there. His tie loosened his face, flushed, clutching that envelope like it might burn through his skin. For the first time in years, he looked small, and I felt free. I knew then that the hardest part wasn't surviving his betrayal. The hardest part was choosing how I would rewrite the story he tried to control. When I drove away from that restaurant, I should have been broken. 28 years of marriage had just been torn apart in public. But instead of tears, there was a strange calm in my chest, like I had finally stepped into sunlight after years of living in shadow. I had carried Gregory's weight for too long. His debts, his failures, his endless search for something more. And now he had handed me the perfect reason to set it all down. As the streets of Augusta blurred past, my windshield memories began to press forward. They came not as a gentle flow, but as sharp flashes, like shards of glass catching light. The first memory was of his very first business venture. He had convinced me to cash out a portion of my savings to help him open a small restaurant with a friend. He swore it was a sure thing. I worked double shifts as a finance manager while he played entrepreneur. Within a year, the restaurant had collapsed and the money was gone. Gregory shrugged, saying, "At least we tried." But I was the one paying off the debt. The second memory was his furniture phase. He called it his passion project. He quit a stable job, poured our joint funds into crafting handcrafted tables and chairs. For 6 months, our garage smelled of sawdust and varnish. Then, like always, the passion evaporated. The tools were sold off, the debt remained, and once again, I was the one who carried us through. And through all of it, I kept telling myself, after Amelia graduates, I'll chase my dream. After Gregory finds stability, I'll start my consultancy. But there was never an after. Gregory's instability was permanent, his selfishness endless. That was why 3 months ago, when I noticed the first irregular bank transfers, something inside me finally shifted. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I quietly investigated. I traced every movement. I collected every receipt. I began building the case that would one day set me free. Looking back now, I realize that betrayal doesn't arrive in one sudden blow. It builds slowly, like water seeping into cracks of concrete until the foundation gives way. Gregory's betrayal had been forming for years. I had simply refused to see it, until the evidence became undeniable. I want to pause here and ask you something. If you had noticed those first small red flags, a strange transfer, a hidden expense, a change in behavior, would you have confronted your partner right away? Or would you have stayed silent and waited like I did? Tell me in the comments what you think you would have done. There's no right or wrong answer, but your perspective might help someone else who is facing the same questions. That night, as I sat alone in my car outside our colonial home, I could almost hear Gregory's voice in my head. Smooth, confident, always explaining away his choices, always turning his failures into my responsibility. But not this time. This time I held the evidence, and I had the law on my side. Inside the envelope he clutched back at the restaurant was not only the divorce filing, but proof of his financial deception and the prenuptial agreement he had signed nearly 3 decades ago. I remember the night we signed it. I was the one with the family money, back then, not him. He had insisted on it, convinced it would protect his future earnings. Irony has a cruel sense of humor. That very document would strip him of nearly everything he tried to hide. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that this wasn't just about punishing Gregory. This was about reclaiming myself. I had been a wife, a mother, a caretaker, but I had not been me. I had buried my ambition, my independence, and even my pride under layers of sacrifice. Now, standing on the edge of this new chapter, I realized I could no longer wait for after. This was my moment. And while Gregory thought he had scripted the perfect exit, he never realized that I had already written my own beginning. Whoa. The betrayal was deep. The pain was real. But the freedom was intoxicating. When I finally pulled into the driveway of our colonial house, the silence struck me first. It was the same home we had purchased 15 years ago, a place once filled with laughter, arguments, and plans for the future. Tonight it felt different, like a stage where the final act had already been written. The porch light flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the lawn, as if even the house itself understood what was about to change. I stepped inside and everything looked painfully normal. Family photos lined the hallway, smiling faces frozen in time. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner, its sound a reminder of years that had passed too quickly. The leather couch still bore the impression of countless evenings we had spent watching movies as a family. But beneath the surface, nothing was normal anymore. Every picture, every object carried the weight of betrayal. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. The closet door creaked as I opened it. And there it was, 2 suitcases already packed and hidden behind his row of shirts. Gregory had been preparing to leave. The man who announced his freedom at a public celebration had already planned his escape long before this night. The sight of those suitcases didn't break me. It confirmed what I already knew: his betrayal was not spontaneous. It was calculated. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Dozens of messages lit up the screen. Friends from the restaurant shocked and eager for details. Amelia, her words frantic. "Mom, are you okay? Where are you?" Even Diana Gregory's sister had reached out. I scrolled through them, ignoring most. I answered only Amelia. "I'm okay. This isn't your burden to carry. Enjoy your graduation. We'll talk tonight. I love you." I had shielded her from the truth for months, not wanting her last year of college to be poisoned by family drama. She deserved that joy, even if I had to carry the weight alone. Some might call it weakness. I call it love. Downstairs, I sat in the living room with my laptop. I opened the file where I had stored months of evidence: bank statements, receipts, photographs, even voice recordings. Gregory believed he was clever, but he underestimated me. Every transfer he made, I tracked. Every dinner he bought for Cassandra, I documented. Every promise he made in whispers, I preserved. And all of it was now in the hands of my attorney. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. Yet I felt a storm gathering. Gregory would come home eventually, furious and desperate. And when he did, I would no longer be the quiet wife smoothing over his mistakes. I would be the woman who had already dismantled his carefully constructed lies. I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. For so long, I had played the role of peacekeeper. But peace without respect is only silence. Tonight, that silence ended. I want to ask you something. If you discovered packed suitcases in your home, proof that your partner was planning to leave, what would you do? Would you confront them immediately, or would you let them step into the trap of their own making? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how you would handle that moment. The hours passed slowly. Finally, headlights swept across the window. His car. A door slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. Then his voice, sharp and enraged: "Victoria, where are you?" He stormed into the living room. His face flushed, the envelope clutched in his hand like it was poison. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. His voice cracked, no longer the confident man who had stood in the restaurant hours earlier. I closed my laptop and looked him straight in the eye. Calm, unshaken. "You wanted to start a new life," I said softly. "I'm simply helping you with the transition." For a moment, his smugness returned. "The prenup expired years ago," he said, almost smiling. "Any lawyer will tell you that." I allowed myself a small smile of my own. Actually, it didn't. Section 12 clearly states the fidelity clause remains valid for the duration of the marriage. His face drained of color. Reality crashed down on him. The same contract he had insisted upon to protect himself was now the weapon that would destroy him. In that instant, I understood something profound. Gregory had built his life on illusions, business ventures, false promises, a secret affair. But illusions collapse under the weight of truth, and tonight truth was all I carried. This was no longer his story, it was mine, and I was just beginning to tell it. Gregory stood in the middle of our living room, his face pale, his breathing shallow. For the first time in our marriage, he looked small to me, like a man cornered by his own lies. He waved the papers from the envelope as if shaking them hard enough could undo the truth printed in black ink. "You served me divorce papers today," he shouted. On the very day of Amelia's graduation, his voice cracked with outrage, but beneath it I heard something sharper: fear. I rose slowly from the couch, smoothing the skirt of my dress, and faced him. "It seemed appropriate," I answered. "You planned your grand exit today. I thought it was fitting to give you mine." He paced, his hands raking through his hair. "You had no right," he barked. I cut him off, my voice steady. "I had every right. Just as you had the right to move money behind my back. Just as you had the right to parade Cassandra through restaurants with our savings. We all make choices, Gregory, and choices have consequences." He tried to smirk, clinging to the arrogance that had always shielded him. "The prenup means nothing. It expired. You won't get away with this. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a calm whisper that chilled him more than yelling ever could. Read Section 12 again. Fidelity. It has no expiration. His lips parted, but no words came. His lawyer had never told him that because he never consulted one. His pride wouldn't allow it. And now that pride was the rope tightening around his neck. He sank onto the couch, his shoulders slumped, staring at the floor. For a long moment the room was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. I wanted to savor this silence. For nearly 3 decades I had filled the empty spaces with encouragement, excuses, compromises. But now the silence belonged to me, and in that silence I felt stronger than I had in years. I turned to leave the room, but then paused. I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, standing face to face with the person who betrayed you, holding undeniable proof in your hands, what would you have said? Would you scream? Would you forgive? Or would you like me? Let calm silence speak louder than rage. Share your answer in the comments. And if stories like this resonate with you, subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this journey. Sometimes we learn the most, not from victories, but from betrayals. Gregory looked up at me, then trying a different tactic. You've always been calculating, he muttered. But this is cold. What about our history? Doesn't 28 years mean anything to you? I studied him, the man I had once believed in. We had weathered miscarriages together. We had celebrated anniversaries with surprise trips. We had shared 1,000 private moments that once felt unbreakable. Did they mean something? Yes? That was why the betrayal cut so deep. But history cannot erase choice, and he had chosen Cassandra. He had chosen deceit. He had chosen to destroy our family on our daughter's most important day. This isn't about forgetting history, I said softly. It's about refusing to let history chain me to a future I no longer want. His eyes flickered desperate again. Maybe we can fix this, he pleaded. People make mistakes. I shook my head. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan, a calculated escape. And I will not spend another year playing the role of the unsuspecting wife while you build a new life on my sacrifices. He stared at me speechless. And in that moment, I knew he finally saw me, not as the woman who would always clean up his messes, but as the woman who had dismantled his illusions. I walked upstairs, leaving him to sit alone in his crumbling world. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, my heart pounded, not with fear, but with freedom. For the first time, I was not the background character in his story. I was the author of my own. The house was quiet the next morning. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, slicing across the hardwood floor. I could hear the faint hum of traffic outside, but inside everything felt suspended, like time itself was holding its breath. Gregory's suitcases were still hidden in the closet upstairs, his grand plan to leave delayed by the envelope he had opened too late. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The aroma filled the air, grounding me. For years, I had started mornings by making Gregory's coffee just the way he liked it, 2 sugars, a splash of cream. Today, I only poured 1 mug, mine. The silence tasted sweeter than sugar. I thought about the sacrifices I had made. The nights I stayed late at Trevanta Corp, running numbers and managing accounts while Gregory jumped from one failed venture to the next. I remembered the months I worked overtime to save for Amelia's education because Gregory had sunk money into his friend's restaurant that never survived its first year. I remembered the furniture phase, how he filled our garage with tools, promising the passion would last. 6 months later, the tools were gone and the debt remained. Every sacrifice, every compromise, I carried it all. Not because I was weak, but because I loved my family, because I believed stability mattered more than pride. But Gregory never saw the difference. To him, my sacrifices were invisible. My stability was simply the floor he walked on. Now that floor had cracked beneath him, and he was falling. I opened my laptop again, scrolling through the files I had gathered. Each transfer to Cassandra's account, each expensive dinner receipt, each photograph of them together when he thought I wasn't watching. It was all there. Evidence not just of infidelity, but of financial betrayal. Gregory had drained money from the family's future to build fantasies with her, and I had documented every step. It struck me then this wasn't just revenge, it was justice. For Amelia. For the years I had lost. For the woman I had silenced inside myself. The kitchen clock ticked louder than usual, filling the silence. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I could almost hear his words from the night before, pleading, bargaining, clinging to history as if it could absolve him. But history means nothing when the present is poisoned. I want to pause here because I know many of you listening have lived something similar. If you have ever sacrificed your own dreams to hold a family together, only to discover betrayal waiting at the end, I want you to tell me, was it worth it? Do you regret the sacrifices? Or do you see them as proof of your strength? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear how my story unfolds, make sure you subscribe. Because this journey is not just about betrayal, it is about becoming someone new. The front door slammed open. Gregory's footsteps echoed down the hall. His voice carried through the house, sharp and impatient. "Victoria, we need to talk." I didn't flinch. I closed my laptop, sipped the last of my coffee, and waited. He appeared in the doorway, his tie loose, his hair disheveled. His eyes darted around like a man searching for solid ground but finding only quicksand. "You can't do this to me," he said. "You're destroying everything we built." I stood meeting his gaze without hesitation. "You destroyed it long before me. You chose her. You chose the money. You chose humiliation. I'm only finishing what you started." His face twisted with anger, then softened with something like despair. "What about Amelia?" he asked. "Have you thought about how this affects her?" That was the moment my calm cracked. I slammed my hand against the table. "Don't you dare use our daughter as your shield. You weren't thinking about her when you bought jewelry for Cassandra. You weren't thinking about her when you planned your exit during her graduation celebration. Don't you dare speak her name as if you care more than I do." For a moment he said nothing. His shoulders sagged. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and groaned. "Cassandra again." I almost laughed. The man who thought he could juggle lies was now drowning in them. "Problem?" I asked, my voice steady. He shoved the phone back into his pocket. "You'll regret this," he spat. "No," I said quietly. "For the first time in my life, I won't." That morning I realized something profound. Betrayal may cut deep, but it also carves out space for something new, and I was ready to fill that space with freedom. Gregory's footsteps echoed through the hallway long after he stormed upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table, finishing the last sip of coffee that had already gone cold. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful this time. It was heavy, like the air before a summer storm. I knew this was only the beginning. A man like Gregory doesn't surrender quietly. He would fight. He would twist the story. He would try to make himself the victim. And I was ready for it. I walked into the living room and pulled out a small fireproof box from the cabinet under the stairs. Inside were carefully organized folders, bank statements, transfer records, screenshots of messages between him and Cassandra, even the lease documents for an apartment he thought I didn't know about. Each piece was a thread. Together they wove a net that no amount of denial could tear apart. For years I had been the one to balance our family books. Gregory thought of money like water, something to pour out freely, something that would always flow back. I thought of it like brick and mortar, something to build with to protect our daughter's future. He underestimated me because my strength was quiet. He never realized that quiet strength can be the most dangerous. I sat on the couch and stared at the files. They didn't just represent betrayal, they represented clarity. Proof that I had not imagined the distance, the secrecy, the growing coldness in our home. Proof that I wasn't crazy as he once suggested when I asked too many questions. I want to ask you something. If you discovered undeniable evidence messages, bank statements, receipts, would you confront your partner immediately, or would you like me gather quietly, prepare and strike when the moment was right? Tell me in the comments. I think many of us underestimate The power of patience. The sun shifted across the living room floor as hours passed. Eventually, Amelia called. Her voice was tight, strained. "Mom, everyone at the restaurant is whispering. Dad told people you've been planning this for months, that you've lost your mind." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. Of course he was already rewriting the narrative. Gregory was a master at flipping blame. "Let him talk," I told her gently. "The truth will surface soon enough." She hesitated. "But Mom, he embarrassed you in front of everyone. Don't you care what they think?" "Amelia," I said softly, for 28 years, I've cared too much about what people think. Tonight I care only about what's true." Her silence on the other end told me she was processing, maybe even beginning to see her father in a new light. It broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. She deserved honesty, even if it was painful. As evening fell, I lit a small lamp in the corner. The house looked the same as it always had, but nothing felt the same anymore. The photos on the wall no longer represented a family. They represented chapters, some beautiful, some unbearable. And I realized I wasn't clinging to them anymore. I was ready to write a new one. Upstairs, I heard Gregory moving slamming drawers, muttering curses under his breath. He was unraveling. Every illusion he had built for himself, Cassandra, the beachfront dreams, the secret account, was slipping away. And all I had done was hand him an envelope. That was the power of truth. Before I went to bed, I wrote Amelia one more message. "I love you. Remember, this isn't your burden. Tomorrow we will talk and you'll understand everything. Tonight, enjoy being proud of yourself. That's what matters." I slid the phone onto the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark. For the first time in years, my heart wasn't racing with worry about bills, about Gregory's next scheme, about how to hold everything together. It was racing with something else, anticipation. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight I had already won the first. What? Because sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes strength is quiet. And sometimes the quietest moves destroy the loudest lies. The next morning arrived with a heavy gray sky. Rain tapped softly against the windows, steady and persistent, like the world itself was echoing my mood. I stood at the sink washing a single coffee mug when I heard Gregory's footsteps on the stairs. He moved slower than usual, each step deliberate, as if he carried weights on his ankles. He entered the kitchen, his face, tired eyes, bloodshot. For a moment, he looked less like the man who had humiliated me at the restaurant, and more like a stranger who had lost his way. He opened his mouth, then closed it, fumbling with the envelope still clutched in his hand. His arrogance was gone. What replaced it was desperation. "You're exaggerating," he muttered, sliding into a chair. "The prenup doesn't mean what you think it does. And even if it does, no judge will side with you." I placed the mug on the counter and turned to him. Calm, measured. "You should have read it more carefully, Gregory. Section 12, fidelity. It doesn't expire. You signed it. You insisted on it." His face tightened. He slammed his hand against the table. "You think you're clever? You think you can take everything from me?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but sharp. "I don't need to take anything. You handed it to me the moment you chose Cassandra." The silence stretched. I could see him struggling anger one moment, pleading the next. His mind was racing through every tactic he had ever used on me: intimidation, guilt, manipulation. None of it worked now. I sat across from him. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I asked quietly. "It's not that you cheated. It's not that you stole money. It's that you thought I was too blind, too loyal, too weak to notice." For the first time, he looked away. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. Cassandra's name flashed across the screen. He silenced it quickly, shame flickering across his face. And that was when I realized something. Cassandra wasn't his escape. She was his mirror. She reflected his hunger for attention, his craving for validation, his fear of aging. He had built a fantasy with her, but fantasies can't survive the weight of truth. I stood gathering my papers. "You have until tomorrow evening to remove your things from this house. After that, the locks will be changed." His head snapped up. "You can't do this." "I already did," I replied. "You should talk to your attorney." He laughed bitterly. "You're cold, heartless." "No, Gregory," I said, my voice low. "I just finally chose myself. I want to pause here. Many of you have probably faced moments where you had to decide, do I stay and keep sacrificing, or do I finally choose myself? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Would you have walked away sooner, or would you have waited like I did? And if you want to know how this story unravels, subscribe now. Because what comes next is where the real unraveling begins. Gregory shoved back from the table and stormed upstairs. Drawers slammed, doors banged shut. He was packing furious, muttering curses under his breath. Each sound was like music to me, not because I enjoyed his anger, but because it confirmed something he no longer controlled the story. Later that day, I called my attorney. His voice was steady, reassuring. The paperwork had been filed. The accounts were frozen. Gregory could shout all he wanted, but the law was already on my side. When I hung up, I walked into Amelia's room. Her graduation cap was still lying on the bed, a symbol of her accomplishment and of the day Gregory tried to ruin. I picked it up gently, running my fingers along the tassel. He didn't break us, I whispered to myself. Not then, not now. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard Gregory pacing in the hallway. His phone buzzed again and again, Cassandra's name lighting the screen. He ignored it. Perhaps she was growing tired of waiting for the fantasy life he had promised. Perhaps she was already realizing the man she thought she loved was only smoke and mirrors. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of rain on the roof soothe me. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, maybe even more chaos. But tonight I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Because when you finally choose yourself, the storm outside doesn't matter. The calm within is enough. The rain had stopped by morning, but the air was still heavy, thick, with the kind of silence that comes before another storm. I woke early, brewed my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the faint creak of the floorboards above me. Gregory hadn't left yet. He was still upstairs pacing, trying to figure out how his perfectly crafted escape plan had collapsed in less than 24 hours. I wasn't in a rush. I had waited months for this moment, quietly preparing, gathering evidence, timing each step, so that when he moved, I would already be 3 steps ahead. What he didn't realize, what he couldn't realize, was that his announcement at Amelia's graduation wasn't the beginning of my downfall. It was the final act of his. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Diana, his sister. "I need to see you. There are things you don't know." My heart skipped, not out of fear, but anticipation. Diana and I had always been close. Gregory never imagined his own sister would betray him. But the truth was, she had seen too much for too long. When I arrived at her bungalow near the university, she greeted me with a hug so fierce it nearly cracked my ribs. She poured 2 glasses of wine before noon, her hands shaking. "I saw him with her," she admitted, "last Christmas. He promised me it was nothing, swore he'd end it. I wanted to believe him. But when I realized he hadn't, I had to tell you." The confession didn't surprise me. It confirmed what I already knew. Gregory's lies had spread so far even family couldn't hold them anymore. I leaned back in her sunroom, surrounded by potted plants and the faint smell of old books. For years I had envied Diana's independence. She never married, never settled for someone unworthy. Now sitting there, I felt the weight of my own choices pressing against me. I told her about the prenup, about the evidence, about the judge who would soon see everything Gregory had tried to hide. She laughed bitterly. The irony is delicious. He wanted that contract to protect himself. Now it's the knife at his throat. I want to pause here because you might think this was the peak. But let me tell you, what happened next was far worse than anything that came before. If you're still with me, don't go anywhere. Because what's about to happen will make you question how far betrayal can twist a family. Subscribe now, because the darkest part of this story is just around the corner. As we talked, my phone buzzed again. Amelia. Her voice was strained tight. "Mom, I'm coming to Aunt Diana's. Dad is telling everyone you're unstable. He says you've been planning this revenge for months." I closed my eyes. Of course he was spinning the story. That was Gregory's gift, turning himself into the victim, no matter what role he played. 20 minutes later, Amelia arrived, still in her graduation dress, makeup smudged from tears. She collapsed into my arms. Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I didn't want to ruin your last semester," I said softly. "I wanted you to have that joy without this weight." She pulled back, eyes blazing. "Well, Dad took care of ruining it anyway." That night, Amelia learned everything. The secret accounts, the affair, the prenup, the carefully timed divorce papers. She listened in silence, her face shifting between anger and grief. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered. "He's been distracted for months, always on his phone. But I never imagined this." Diana placed a comforting hand on Amelia's shoulder. "None of us want to see the truth when it's someone we love." My phone buzzed once more. A message from my attorney: emergency filing approved. Accounts frozen. He won't be able to touch the funds until after the hearing. I showed it to Amelia. Her jaw tightened. "Good," she said firmly. "He deserves it." But in her eyes I saw something else, a deep wound. A daughter realizing her father wasn't who she thought he was. And I knew this was only the beginning of her reckoning. That night, as we sat together in Diana's living room, I felt the storm gathering again. Gregory wouldn't give up. He would come. And when he did, he wouldn't be alone. The doorbell rang just as the last of Diana's words faded into silence. Amelia stiffened beside me, her hands gripping the hem of her dress. Diana walked to the door, her shoulders squared, and when she returned, her face was grave. "It's Gregory," she said, "and he's not alone." The room felt colder instantly. My heart didn't race. I had prepared for this, but I could feel Amelia trembling. Gregory entered, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a fury I had seen before but never aimed so directly at me. Behind him trailed Cassandra, shifting uncomfortably, her polished smile gone, her eyes darting like she wished she could disappear. "Victoria, you need to stop this madness," Gregory barked the moment he crossed the threshold. "Unfreeze the accounts. Let's sit down like reasonable adults." Before I could respond, Amelia stood up. My daughter, who had always been gentle, always eager to please, stepped in front of me like a shield. Her voice cut like glass. "Maybe you should have tried being reasonable before announcing to everyone that you were leaving Mom. On my graduation day." Gregory blinked as if he had only just realized she was in the room. "Amelia, this doesn't involve you." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Doesn't involve me. You blew up our family on the most important day of my life, and you think it doesn't involve me." Cassandra touched his arm, whispering, "Greg, maybe we should go." But Gregory shook her off, his chest heaving. "I'm not leaving until Bianca," he spat my name like poison, "agrees to be rational about this." Diana crossed her arms, her voice firm. "The only rational person here is your sister-in-law. You're the one who created this mess." For years I had played the peacemaker, smoothing over fights, patching Gregory's ego, keeping harmony at any cost. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I met his glare calmly. "The accounts will remain frozen until the hearing in 3 days. The judge will decide, not you." His face flushed deep red. 3 days. What am I supposed to do until then? "You have your personal account," I replied evenly. "The one you've been funneling money into for over a year. That should be enough." Cassandra's head snapped toward him, her voice sharp. "You have a separate account with how much in it?" For a split second, Gregory's mask cracked. His silence was answer enough. Cassandra's face hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She looked less like a lover and more like a woman realizing she had been deceived too. This was what Gregory never understood. Lies breed more lies, and eventually they collide. "I want to pause here and ask you something. If you discovered your partner was hiding a secret account, money siphoned behind your back, what would you do? Would you walk away immediately, or would you use it as leverage like I did? Leave me your answer in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how quickly Gregory's empire of lies collapses, because what's coming will shock you." Amelia's voice broke the silence. She turned to Cassandra, her eyes full of contempt. "Did you know he was going to announce it like that, in front of everyone?" Cassandra's lips trembled. I thought he would talk to her privately, the announcement. She shook her head. It was unexpected. Gregory's glare shifted to her betrayal in his eyes. Cracks were spreading in their so-called partnership. "I think you both should leave," Diana said firmly, her voice cold. "You've upset Amelia enough for one day." "Amelia," Gregory pleaded, ignoring Diana. "You understand, don't you? Sometimes people grow apart, relationships change. Amelia's face hardened. What I understand is that you're a coward. You stole from our family while I was working 2 jobs to pay for textbooks because you told me money was tight. Gregory paled. That's not how it was. It's exactly how it was, she snapped. Please leave, Dad. I can't look at you right now. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Gregory turned to Cassandra, trailing behind him. At the door, he looked back at me, his voice low but venomous. This isn't over. I'll fight you. I met his gaze steadily. You're welcome to try. Oh. That night after the door closed behind them, Amelia collapsed next to me, tears streaking her cheeks. I've never talked to Dad like that, she whispered. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. Sometimes standing up for what's right is painful, I said softly. But it's the only way forward. And as Diana raised her glass of wine, murmuring to new beginnings, I knew she was right. This wasn't an ending. It was the first step toward a life we were building on truth, not lies. The house felt lighter once Gregory and Cassandra were gone, but the echoes of their presence lingered like smoke after a fire. Amelia sat beside me on the couch, her eyes red, her hands clenched in fists. Diana moved quietly in the kitchen, pouring another round of wine, her movements steady, like she'd done this 1,000 times for students who came to her broken-hearted and bruised by life. I leaned back, exhaustion pressing against my shoulders, but inside a small ember of strength kept burning. Gregory thought he had cornered me, but he was the one trapped. His lover had just seen the cracks in his story. His daughter had turned against him, and in 3 days, a courtroom would strip away the last illusions he had left. Amelia broke the silence first. I can't believe he used me as an excuse. That he tried to act like this had nothing to do with me. I touched her hand gently. That's what people like your father do. They rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. But you saw the truth with your own eyes. Never let him twist that. Her jaw tightened. He said money was tight. He let me work 2 jobs, Mom. He let me believe we were struggling while he was taking Cassandra to restaurants and shopping for houses. How could he do that to me? Her words cut deeper than I expected. Gregory hadn't only betrayed me, he had betrayed our daughter. He had stolen her trust, her pride, and even her youth. I swallowed the lump in my throat, keeping my voice steady. Some people will do anything to protect their illusions, even if it means sacrificing the people closest to them. But remember this, Amelia. His choices are not your fault. They never were. Diana returned, handing Amelia a glass of water. Your father's pride has always been his downfall, she said softly. He never thought anyone could outsmart him, but he forgot who raised him. Our family doesn't tolerate betrayal. Amelia looked at me, then her voice low but firm. I don't know if I can ever forgive him. I squeezed her hand. Forgiveness is not for him, sweetheart. It's for you. You can decide if you want to give it or not. That's your choice. But don't carry his sins as if they're yours. The doorbell rang again, sharp and unexpected. My heart skipped. For a moment, I thought Gregory had returned. But when Diana opened the door, no one was there, only an envelope dropped on the mat. Inside was a letter written in Gregory's hand. The words were angry, frantic, a desperate plea mixed with threats. You'll regret this. You're destroying our family. Cassandra and I deserve a chance at happiness. I read it twice, then set it down. His handwriting, once familiar, now looked like scribbles from a stranger. The threats didn't scare me, they revealed his fear. I want to pause here. What would you have done with that letter? Would you keep it as evidence, or tear it to pieces, as if the words never existed? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to see how his desperation escalates, subscribe now, because the storm was only beginning. That night, Amelia slept in Diana's guest room. I lay awake in the bed across the hall, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the evening like a film. Gregory's face when Amelia called him a coward. Cassandra's shock when she realized he had lied to her too. The way his voice cracked when he realized the prenup was ironclad. I realized then that men like Gregory don't fall all at once. They unravel thread by thread. And each lie, each deception, each selfish act pulls one more stitch, until the entire fabric comes apart. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to simply defend myself in court. I was going to dismantle him piece by piece. Every lie he told would be exposed, every hidden dollar traced, every betrayal documented, because this wasn't just about divorce. This was about truth. And truth I knew was far more powerful than Gregory ever imagined. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. My attorney Philip called me each morning with updates. Every account we flagged was frozen. Every transfer Gregory made to Cassandra's lifestyle was now under review. For the first time in decades, the money Gregory had always treated like his private playground was beyond his reach. But he didn't go quietly. He left messages on my phone at all hours, angry at first, then pleading, then angry again. He accused me of betrayal, as if I were the one who had broken vows. He said I had turned Amelia against him, as if she hadn't seen the truth with her own eyes. He even suggested we could fix things if I agreed to release the funds. I ignored him. Diana stood by my side through everything, offering both comfort and steel. "He's unraveling," she said one evening, pouring us tea. "You've stripped away the image he worked so hard to protect. He's desperate now. Desperation makes people sloppy." And she was right. On the second night, Cassandra showed up at Diana's door. Her polished exterior was gone. She looked restless, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. "I didn't sign up for this," she said quickly. "Gregory told me he had money, that he was leaving you cleanly, that Amelia would understand. But everything he promised was a lie." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I studied her. For months, she had been the shadow in the corner of my marriage, the one who shared wine with me at Christmas, while secretly sharing my husband's bed. But now she was only another victim of Gregory's lies. "You believed him," I said finally. "That was your mistake. I lived with him for 28 years, and even I didn't see how deep his deceptions went. But now you know who he really is." Cassandra swallowed hard, then nodded. "I won't stand by him in court. I can't. Not after this." She turned quickly, leaving without another word. Amelia watched from the hallway. Her eyes were sharp, but her voice was soft. "Do you think she really cared for him?" I sighed. She cared for the image of him, the fantasy. But fantasies collapse when the money runs out. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the ticking of Diana's clock. I thought about everything Gregory had stolen from me, years, dreams, trust. And I thought about what I had gained in return: strength, clarity, and the courage to finally claim the life I wanted. Still, there was a part of me unsettled, because as much as Gregory was losing, I knew he wasn't finished fighting. Men like him never admit defeat. He would come at the hearing ready to claw back whatever scraps of dignity he could find. And in the middle of that thought, a strange calm settled over me. Let him fight. The more he thrashed, the more evidence he revealed. The more he tried to twist the truth, the more the truth exposed him. I want to pause here because I know what you might be wondering. Was the prenup really enough to bring him down? Could one document signed nearly 3 decades ago truly strip a man of everything he thought he had built? Stay with me, because the courtroom battle that followed revealed a twist that even Gregory never saw coming. Subscribe now, you won't want to miss what happened when the judge read those words aloud. When morning came, Amelia found me at the kitchen table, sipping coffee again. She sat beside me, her hand brushing mine. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she whispered. "I hate what he did, but you didn't break. You stood tall." Her words filled me with something deeper than victory. They filled me with peace. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about showing my daughter that betrayal doesn't define you, it refines you. And as the day of the hearing approached, I realized that Gregory's greatest mistake wasn't cheating or stealing or lying. His greatest mistake was underestimating me. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived gray and wet, the courthouse steps slick with rain. I walked beside my attorney Philip, my heels striking against the stone every step, reminding me that this wasn't just another day. It was the day I would face Gregory in front of the law. I carried no fear, only resolve. Gregory was already inside when we arrived. He looked haggard, his once carefully styled hair limp, his suit wrinkled as if he had slept in it. By his side sat a young attorney barely out of law school, flipping nervously through files. The sight almost made me laugh. Gregory had spent months funneling money into secret accounts for Cassandra, yet here he was with a lawyer who looked like he had been dragged in from a classroom. The judge entered, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that cut through the room like glass. She wasted no time. I've reviewed the prenuptial agreement. Section 12, fidelity is still binding. Section 18 makes it clear the duration is for the entire term of the marriage, plus any proceedings resulting from its dissolution. Gregory's lawyer stammered, trying to argue expiration, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. There is no expiration date listed. Your client signed it. Your client will be held to it. Gregory leaned forward, whispering furiously to his lawyer. His face was bright red, his fists clenched. The judge continued, flipping through documents. I've also reviewed evidence of systematic fund transfers, money moved without disclosure. That alone violates Section 23. She looked directly at Gregory. This court will maintain the freeze on joint accounts pending full discovery. Mr. Caldwell's personal account will remain accessible, but the family home remains under Mrs. Caldwell's possession as stipulated in the fidelity clause. The gavel struck, final, irrefutable. Gregory's voice cracked. This is outrageous. The judge's gaze was icy. What's outrageous, Mr. Caldwell, is attempting to defraud your spouse while assuming the court wouldn't notice. We will reconvene in 30 days. As we left the courtroom, Gregory rushed after me in the hallway, his voice dropping into something almost pathetic. Victoria, please. 28 years has to count for something. We can't just throw it away. I stopped, turned to him, and spoke with a calmness I hadn't known I was capable of. It did count, Gregory. It counted until you decided it didn't. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. He reached out his hand, trembling, but I stepped back. His touch no longer belonged to me. He was a stranger now. A stranger clinging to illusions while I walked toward truth. I want to pause here. If you've ever had to face someone in a courtroom, a partner, a spouse, maybe even family, what did it feel like to look them in the eye, knowing the law was on your side? Share your story in the comments. And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe and stay with me, because the final verdict isn't just about property. It's about reclaiming dignity. Word spread quickly. Friends who had once smiled politely at our dinner parties now whispered behind Gregory's back. His reputation as a successful businessman was crumbling. He had promised Cassandra beachfront property, luxury cars, vacations. Now, with frozen accounts, he couldn't even keep up the lease on their apartment. Diana called me 2 weeks later, her voice tinged with amusement. Have you heard the latest? Cassandra moved out? Apparently, she discovered Gregory doesn't have the fortune he claimed. She said she didn't sign up for financial problems. I couldn't help but laugh. It was poetic. The man who spent decades creating illusions had finally been abandoned when those illusions collapsed. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. I rented a small office downtown. For years, I had dreamed of opening a consultancy to help women understand their finances. Now, free from Gregory's shadow, I was making it real. My first clients were women going through divorces of their own. I guided them step by step, showing them the very tools I had once used to free myself. Amelia called me often, her voice warm, proud. You're helping people, Mom. You're showing them what strength looks like. And she was right. Strength wasn't screaming in a restaurant. Strength was building a life from ashes. Gregory thought the prenup would protect him. He never realized it would liberate me. The weeks after the preliminary hearing felt like stepping into a different life. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, my days were mine. No more cleaning up Gregory's financial chaos. No more waiting for his next whim or failed venture. Each morning, I walked into the small office I had rented, downtown sunlight streaming through the tall windows, and felt something I hadn't in years: purpose. Caldwell Financial Transitions. That was the name etched on the frosted glass of the door. It wasn't just a business, it was a declaration. I was no longer simply Gregory's wife or Amelia's mother. I was a woman rebuilding her identity and giving other women the tools to do the same. My first clients were two women navigating divorces eerily similar to mine. They sat across from me, their eyes hollow, their voices shaky, clutching folders filled with bank statements they didn't understand. I guided them through every line, showing them how to trace assets, how to demand fairness, how to protect themselves from men who thought secrecy equaled power. With each meeting, I felt myself grow stronger. Their gratitude was quiet, but profound. One said softly, "I wish I had someone like you years ago." At night, I came home to Diana's bungalow. She cooked simple meals, the smell of roasted vegetables and herbs filling the air. Amelia visited, often still reeling from her father's betrayal, but slowly finding her own footing. We would sit together in the living room, books spread across the coffee table, sharing stories, laughter, sometimes tears. Healing isn't linear, but every day we stitched ourselves back together. Meanwhile, Gregory unraveled. The accounts remained frozen, and without my financial guidance, his business began to falter. Cassandra had left him disillusioned by his empty promises. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to attach their names to scandal. He was alone, drowning in the very lies he had built. One evening, Amelia asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think Dad ever really loved us, or was it always about him?" I paused, my chest tightening. "How do you answer that for your child?" I think I said slowly. "Your father loved us in the only way he knew how. But love without respect, love without honesty, isn't enough. We deserve more than that." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "You're right." I want to pause here, because many of you listening may have faced the same question. When someone betrays you, how do you reconcile the love that once existed with the pain they caused? Do you separate the two, or does the betrayal erase the love entirely? Share your thoughts below. I believe your answers can help others who are still searching for clarity. And if you're finding strength in this story, make sure to subscribe, because the final chapter of this journey is one you won't want to miss. As the weeks turned into months, my consultancy grew. Word spread quickly. I wasn't just managing money, I was teaching women to claim their independence, to never again feel powerless in front of a betrayal. Each new client reminded me that my pain had been transformed into something valuable. Out of destruction, I had built purpose. On what would have been our 29th anniversary, I stood in the same courthouse, where Gregory and I had once signed our vows into law. Only this time I wasn't promising to stay. I was finalizing my freedom. The courtroom was quiet, the rain outside soft and steady, almost cleansing. Gregory looked older, thinner, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. His lawyer shuffled nervously, clearly outmatched by Philip's steady confidence. The judge upheld the prenup in its entirety. The house, the retirement accounts, 70% of our joint investments, all awarded to me. Gregory, left with his personal belongings, his struggling business, and the dwindling balance of his secret account. He tried to speak to me afterward, his voice low, almost broken. "I made a mistake. Is there any chance?" I stopped him gently but firmly. "No, Gregory, that door is closed." His eyes flickered with regret, but I didn't linger. I walked out of the courthouse, the rain falling softly on my face, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. What began as betrayal had transformed into rebirth. And though the scars would remain, they were no longer marks of pain, they were proof of survival. The final hearing arrived on a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after Gregory's public betrayal. The courthouse steps were blanketed with fallen leaves, crunching under my heels as I walked up with Philip at my side. I carried no fear, only clarity. Everything I had endured, the humiliation, the lies, the months of quiet preparation had led to this day. Inside the courtroom, Gregory sat slouched at the defendant's table. His suit hung loosely on him now, his hair graying at the edges. Cassandra was gone, and so were most of his so-called friends. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, a man stripped bare by his own deceptions. The judge entered her presence, commanding silence. She reviewed the prenuptial agreement once more, her voice calm but decisive. "This contract is valid and enforceable. Given the evidence of infidelity and financial misconduct, the court awards Mrs. Caldwell the family, home, her retirement accounts, and 70% of joint investments. Mr. Caldwell will retain his personal possessions and his private account. The gavel struck, final, irrevocable. Gregory's shoulders sagged. His lawyer whispered something, but he didn't respond. When the session ended, he followed me into the hallway, his voice low, almost broken. "Victoria, I made a mistake. I lost everything. Please, can we—" I turned, meeting his eyes one last time. "No, Gregory, that door is closed. You chose lies over us. Now I choose myself." He nodded slowly, perhaps for the first time truly understanding. "You deserve happiness," he said quietly. And for once I believed he meant it. I stepped out of the courthouse, the autumn sun warming my face. Freedom didn't come with fireworks or applause. It came with peace. A peace I had fought for piece by piece until I reclaimed it entirely. In the months that followed, Caldwell Financial Transitions grew beyond anything I expected. I hired 2 associates. Women from across Augusta and even beyond sought my help to secure their futures. Amelia visited often, her eyes shining with pride. "You turned your pain into power, Mom," she told me. And she was right. Because betrayal had not broken me, it had remade me. I want to pause here because I know many of you listening have lived through betrayal too. Tell me in the comments, what did betrayal teach you about yourself? Did it weaken you, or did it give you strength you never knew you had? Your story might be the encouragement someone else desperately needs. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and continue this journey with me. I share not just tales of betrayal, but lessons of resilience, freedom, and the power to rebuild. As I sit here now in my new office with my name etched on the door, I think about that cream-colored envelope I placed beside Gregory's plate months ago. He thought it was the end of me, but really it was the beginning, the key that unlocked not just my freedom, but my rebirth. And though scars remain, they remind me of something powerful. Pain can be a prison, or it can be the doorway to liberation. This chapter of my life is closed, but your story is still being written. If you've walked with me this far, I invite you to walk further. Click to watch the next story, because every ending carries the seed of a new beginning, and sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most extraordinary transformations. When I look back now, I don't see only the betrayal, the shouting in the restaurant, or the hollow promises that crumbled in court. I see the woman who walked out of that door with her head held high, refusing to play the victim. I see the mother who shielded her daughter's joy, even while her own world collapsed. I see the person I became when I chose not to surrender, but to rebuild. The truth is, betrayal will scar you. It will shake the ground beneath your feet. But it also clears away illusions, stripping life down to what is real. And in that painful clarity, you can either fall apart or you can rise. I chose to rise. Caldwell Financial Transitions isn't just a business to me. It is proof that our greatest wounds can become our greatest strengths. Each woman who walks into my office brings with her a story of heartbreak, of loss of survival. And with each story, I am reminded that resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning to carry it differently, turning it into fuel rather than chains. Amelia is thriving now. She tells me she's proud not just of what I built, but of how I refused to let betrayal define me. That more than any court victory or financial gain is what matters most, showing her that freedom is worth fighting for. If there's one lesson my journey offers, it's this. Your story isn't over when someone betrays you. It begins again. And sometimes the chapters written after heartbreak are the ones that shine the brightest. So I close this chapter with peace. Because in losing Gregory, I found something far more valuable myself.